Thank you all for coming down on this third morning of the conference at 9 a.m. Bless your souls for being here. There may be a coffee delivery at some point. The guy downstairs promised, we'll bring you coffee if it shows up. So there may be an interruption for a caffeine inoculation. So I'm going to be giving my talk, Sowing the Seeds of Diversity, which is about building a healthy, sustainable software communities. So who am I? My name is Mark Smith. I'm the co-founder of Dreamwith Studios. I'll talk a bit more about that project in a second, but we're an open source blogging, community networking website. That's my sort of nights and weekends project. By day, I'm the operations lead for Bump Technologies. We make mobile applications for Android and iPhone that you may have heard of. Personally, I'm a jack of all trades. I've worked all over the stack, racking and stacking hardware, building networks, cabling, data center stuff, up to writing systems administration, DBA, et cetera, software, you name it, I've done it. So I'm going to begin with a problem statement and sort of why am I talking about this today and what is my goal of being here and what am I trying to convince you of, or maybe you're already convinced, but what am I trying to convey here? I think that homogeneity holds us back. I think that if you put the same inputs into the same problems over and over, you get the same outputs. And I think that that's unfortunate. I think that if we want to embrace creativity and innovation, that diversity is a key way to do that. I also think, as someone who has worked in both types of environments, in very homogeneous open source projects, in startups that are populated by young, single people of certain stripes, and in companies that are a little more diverse, I think that it ends up creating a healthier environment when you have people of different backgrounds. You end up being a little more aware of people and what people need and how people work. So this is where I'm starting, and this is my belief. There's a lot of studies, especially about how team diversity in background, in information, in experiences can lead to more creative thought, more sort of disruptive thought, if you want to use that word, in the innovative sense, not in the conflict sense. So this is where I'm starting from. Welcome and good morning. Thank you for being here at this.
Didn't realize I was over here.
Oh yeah, no worries. So I will start with a bit of a caveat, because any sort of a discussion about diversity is a huge discussion, and it covers many things. I'm going to talk specifically about two types of diversity that the project that I work with has had some success with, and that's gender and skill diversity. I'm going to not be talking a lot about one of the many others: race, ethnicity, size, nationality, sexual orientation, neurotype, religion, age, culture, family status, et cetera. The list of how many ways that people can be diverse is as long as the number of people that there are in the world, and there's a lot of people out there. So it's a little focused, a little narrow. If there are many other types, and some of them Dreamwith does not do as well on, and if there are suggestions, if you have thoughts, if you have ideas, if you have ways to possibly help us address that, I'd love to hear them, because I would love us to be better than we are. So this is my caveat. Now let's talk a bit about Dreamwith Studios, the project. We forked from LiveJournal back in 2008. You may have heard of LiveJournal. If not, you may have heard of Memcache, which is a project that we created about 10 years ago. LiveJournal was a open source social networking website back before they called it social networking. Media, communication, creative fiction, photos, that sort of thing. LiveJournal itself started back in 1999. It ended up being purchased by some commercial entities, and back in 2008, my business partner, Denise, came up with the idea of, well, it's not really being maintained as an open source project. Maybe we could do something with that. So we did. Since then, we've had over 130 unique contributors, and these are people credited with patches. We've had a lot more than that who have come in to help with many of the other parts of the project, with documentation, with styles, with design, with support, with you name it. Interestingly, 70% of our contributors identify as female. And if you've been at all in the open source community or in technology in general, this is a little higher than most projects. But also, and important for me as well, half of them are new to Perl or programming. Right? These are people who have never touched Perl before, or who have just never programmed, or maybe had an interest in computers 10 years ago and then didn't for one reason or another. And now they're coming back and saying, maybe I could do that. And yes, they can. So these are numbers and these are points on a slide. But what does this look like? Back in 2009, Scud, whom you may know or know of, gave a keynote. Everybody knows Scud. She gave a keynote at OSCON in 2009 called, I've lost the name, Standing Out from the Crowd. But she put together a photo of Dream with volunteers and contributors. And so these are people who have opted in to be part of this collage, part of a presentation. And these are some of our volunteers, some of whom are actually in the audience here, many of whom are not. But that's kind of what it looks like, or it could look like. So let me start by telling you our secret. And I put secret in quotes because it's not really a secret. It's, in my opinion, 10 years ago I had no idea what I was talking about here. But now, in retrospect, it's really obvious. People are the priority, and code is the product, right? Yeah, we're here to build software, and that's great. But I'm building a community. I'm building people who can go out and write the software, people who work together, people who have shared vision, shared goal, a willingness to come together and say, we're going to have this disagreement, but we're going to work through it, and we're going to figure it out, and we're going to build a kick-ass product. And don't get me wrong, we wouldn't be here if the product wasn't successful. If people didn't use our site, then we wouldn't be able to fly out the dozen people we flew out here to be at the conference. It's a successful project. We care about our product. We care about our bugs. We care about the software and the features. But we care about the people, and that's my priority. So, typical open source projects. You've probably contributed to them, or you've been a part of them, or you at least read about them. They want you to know what you're doing when you arrive. You show up. You have to know how to use Git or Mercurial or whatever. They're not going to teach you how to do that. They're not going to have a lot of information or introductions or people who are designated to help newcomers, things like that. And broadly speaking, I'm generalizing. Most projects are this way. Some projects will have 3 of these or 4 of these. Some will be better at certain parts than others. If you really want to work on the diversity or the non-traditional contributors in your project, you have to sort of holistically embrace many of the opposites of these. Traditional projects reject patches easily. If they're not exactly what they need, they're not going to take the time to sit down with you and fix them or help you out. There's a lack of supporting our educational infrastructure. Again, tying in with the expect you to know what you're doing when you arrive. They're not really there to help you out and develop you. And no explicit cultural standards. This is a large one too. We, especially in open source, we have a really tendency to not want to tell people how to act or how to behave or what's okay or what's not okay. And there's a lot of good reasons for that, but I think that that's harmful to, or can be harmful to building a healthy community. We need to be able to say what is okay and what isn't okay. And I'll talk more about that. And little willingness to deal with toxic contributors. So I work in Silicon Valley. I live out in Mountain View, and I've worked in startups for the past 10 years. There's a very big ethos of the 10x contributor, the person who is so good and so awesome that you'll do anything to hire them and you'll do anything to keep them. And you'll tolerate any idiosyncrasies or behavior from them because they're just so much better and so much more awesome. And without them, you wouldn't have a product. I think that's kind of crap. I think, I'm not going to say that has never happened or could never happen, but I think by and large, that's not true. And I think that you do more harm than good by embracing that ideology. So these are some of the behaviors of typical open source projects. But let me call out for a moment and say, we have been a successful community. We have built software. SpaceX uses Linux to power their rockets, to power the Dragon capsule as it takes off from Earth and flies up to the International Space Station. And that's a crazy amount of work and precision maneuvers and just, I would call that successful. OpenOffice or LibreOffice, Linux by and large, Apache, the list of open source projects out there that has made this world a better place, that is working in, sort of other parts of the world that are less advantaged than the United States, is huge. So don't let me, or don't take what I'm saying as open source has failed or has not been successful, because we have been. I just think that we could be more successful. So If all you care about is software, you might be tempted to say that, okay, this is good enough, but I'm going to ask you, is it really? Is it really okay to say that where we are now, with the contributors that we have today, is that okay? Is that acceptable? Or should we be better? So I am obviously a white male. And according to my Google fact checking, that means I'm part of roughly 10% of the population of the world that could call themselves white males. And if you look around most open source projects, they're mostly male, and a large part of them are white. So I'm going to just roughly say that open source has captured 10% of that market, of the market of possible contributors in the world. But where are the other 90%? Let's talk about that. And this is from my point of view. I don't know all of the answers here, and this is a subject that I'm really just trying to learn. So if I say something wrong, then I will apologize. And if I give offense, please let me know. One of the first things that I had to realize is that people are different. People are really, really, really different. And you think, yeah, you look around and you say, okay, we've got all sorts of people in the room, all sorts of different, from different backgrounds and look different. But it's more than just that. It's more than just like what somebody looks like. It's where they're from, how they were raised, what kind of family they're in. You know, what is their financial background? What is their cultural background? What is their religious background? People are very, very, very different. And we go back to there are many types of diversity in the world as there are people. And that's a lot. A lot of people don't have the advantages of the majority. Being white gives you certain advantages. Being male gives you certain advantages. Being born in the United States gives you certain advantages. Being from a middle class or upper class family gives you certain advantages. Having political connections, et cetera, et cetera. These all give you certain benefits in your life, certain advantages. It's kind of like running, I say, the sort of the nerd joke is being white male is kind of like having root. It's a little easier. But the other 90%, the rest of the world, often don't have those advantages. When I was 10, my dad gave me a hand-me-down computer and said, you'll probably like this. Why don't we sit down and write some code together? And he showed me BASIC, and so I started programming when I was 10 with my dad, because that's kind of one of the things that boys did. He tried to do the same with my brothers. In my social group at school, in the youth groups, I couldn't think of a single girl who had the same opportunity. I couldn't think of a single girl who had a computer given to her when she was 10. That wasn't the expectation. That just wasn't done. That wasn't what parents did. That wasn't what they thought. Because that, for whatever reason, this is not going to be, my dad gave it to me and said, this is going to help you for the future. Computers are where it's at. Same thing didn't happen with girls. And I think to a large part, that doesn't happen in other parts of the world that don't have as much money, aren't as well-to-do as the United States, et cetera. There's a lot of discouragement. Rather than just the lack of encouragement, there's also a lot of active discouragement, right? There's a lot of talk about expectations of success or what you're expected to do, what kinds of careers you're expected to go into, the test results you're expected to get. A friend was telling me about a study that was done with kids that were going to take the SATs. And they did this in a mixed race community. And if you sat down with someone and said, oh, you're a person of color, before they took the test, they scored worse than someone who wasn't reminded of their background, of the expectations, the cultural conditioning that are put on people. There's another sort of thing that really I realized, and it's okay to laugh at this, but a couple of years ago I realized this, that when I sit down to think about, okay, people are different, people like different things, people want different things. Not everybody drinks beer, right? You think, okay, we're just going to go down to the pub, we're going to invite everybody over, we're going to have a few drinks, talk about what we're doing, right? Okay. You think that might be the most mundane, unobjectionable activity in the world, but not necessarily, right? Depending religious backgrounds or personal backgrounds or medical backgrounds, there are many reasons that people might not want to drink. And having the default be let's go down to the bar is uncomfortable for many people. Not even considering the fact that if you're the one woman in a group of 14 guys who want to go down to the bar, that just may not be your idea of a good time. That may not be acceptable for you for any reason. And you may not feel safe, yeah, which is huge, right? And that's something that I don't have to think about. That's one of my advantages. So for me, this was just realizing this a couple of years ago. It was just huge for me and just helped me understand. So I've talked a bit about this sort of cultural background. So I'm going to talk about sort of the baggage, the stereotypes, these are the things that I'm trying to actively work against, and these are the things that have to be fought against if you want to take your project from the 10% market share to the 100% of possible contributors in the world. There are stereotypes, and these are things that we've all grown up with. You hear about certain comments about, race or background or color or gender or et cetera, and those are things that are harmful and are wrong, right? These are not, if you're going to build a healthy community and if your goal is to build people who can succeed, who can contribute to these projects, to your projects, you have to fight against that. You have to judge people on their individuality, on who they are and what they do and what they bring to your project, not where they came from. Because that's in the past, that's behind. What matters is what you're going to do next and where you're going to go from here. So I mentioned Dream with Secret is focusing on the people, that is our priority. And that's a large part of that is thinking about where folks come from, what kind of things they might bring with them, and how can we fight against that? How can we build an environment that says, that's crap, we're different here, we can do better here. So much of the things that we're about to talk about are designed to sort of broadly combat these stereotypes and these voices that people have grown up with that said you can't or you shouldn't, or maybe you should try something else. So people first philosophy. You're already here. Congratulations. The first step is admitting, or at least understanding, that you want to know more about this. So even if you walk away from this and don't actually do anything with this, thank you for being here and thank you for listening. I think the more people that hear this sort of thing, the better our communities will be, the better the world will be. So what do I mean by people first philosophy? It's building up the people of your project. I do not think that the people who contribute to my open source project are going to do so forever. And I certainly hope that I'm not the last project that they ever contribute to. My goal, my hope, is that people who come to Dream With and they work with us, they learn to code, they do whatever, that they will then go on to contribute to other projects. They will help spread the message, bring this sort of behaviors and practices that we have, and bring them out to other projects. That's my hope. So I want to build them up. Short-term and long-term, everybody wants to think or wants to be a long-term thinker, and it's hard. It's really, really hard. But in this way, this is an area where that's really vitally important, because, you could argue that the payoff would be better by spending time recruiting the people who already know how to code, who are already ready to do it, but I actually disagree with that. I think that spending 3 months of my time now to help train up a few people, to get them to a point where they can self-sustain, and then those people helping to train up more people, I think in 6 months and 12 months, you'll be far more successful than by not doing that, by ignoring that. And I'd like to think that Dream With is sort of proof of that. We've had over 130 unique contributors over the past few years, and I don't know how that compares to many projects, and certainly that's less than some large projects, but I think that's pretty successful. Some of our contributors have gone on to other projects to work with other things that they found interesting, and I love it. Consider more than just the code velocity. Since we're talking about people here, you want to think about their needs, their desires, where they want to go, what kinds of things they might need. And that's more than just your bug count. That's more than how many features you can release. And don't get me wrong, that's important. Dream With is building a product. It is building something that we have users for. We have 150,000 people, 30-day actives, who show up and use our site and love it. And they are why we're here. They're why we have a project. So it's still important to accomplish this, to work on the code. But the people are where it's at. creating a virtuous self-reinforcing circle. A lot of the things that I talk about will be about building people up and then encouraging them to build up more people. This ends up being a self-reinforcing loop. It really does. If you establish the pattern of behavior from the top, from your project leaders, then people will start following it, and then it'll feed into itself. So one of our volunteers, she was a volunteer for about a year, and then she took some time off, and then she just recently came back. She wrote something to her journal that I completely unsolicited, but really, to me, helps call out something that I found really important here. And so she says, this is the kind of reason why Dreamwith has a huge crowd of people working on it, who don't all come from traditional open source and hobby programmer roots. I don't think I could bring myself to contribute in an environment where the atmosphere is friendly but competitive. Obviously, I can't compete with people who have 25 years more experience than I do. So we talked about the cultural conditioning. When I was 10, my dad gave me a computer. And my friend Erin, she didn't get that. I think when she was 16, she ended up having a computer in the house, in the living room. But she didn't need one herself, right? She didn't need her own because, well, maybe she was going to do biology or something, but she wasn't going to go into computers for sure, right? That sort of expectation. So I got started. By the time I got to college, I had been coding for nearly 10 years. I was good at it, right? I was ready to go into this. I'd been contributing to open source, no problem. So when it came time to look for jobs, I was done. I had 10 years of experience. I was in, right? The girls that I knew didn't have that opportunity. And so, as this woman called out, right, it's just, she doesn't want to be part of an environment that's based on competition, even if it's friendly, because it's not fair. And it's just not a good use of her time, a good use of her skills. So think about that when you think about, oh, well, it's just a little friendly competition, or it's just this or that, right? No, it's more than that. So keep people first philosophy, how do we do that? Building a positive culture, respect. I call that out first because all of this builds on, I call it basic human decency, but it's respect for your fellow human beings. It's appreciating them for the time that they put in, for the skills, for the willingness to learn, for their willingness to fly out to a conference in the middle of Texas, for everything that they do to be part of your project. Building a culture of acceptance and encouragement. This is huge, right? A lot of people from non-traditional backgrounds, non-traditional in the terms of the 10% that typically contribute to open source. So when I say non-traditional, I'm referring to the other 90%, which I hope will eventually be traditional, right? That is my goal here, that eventually in 10 years, that will be quaint. But building a culture of acceptance and encouragement, because most people, the 90%, haven't had that. They haven't run into that. And a lot of building a more diverse project, a healthier project ecosystem, is fighting that, is actively accepting and encouraging people. Everybody can make mistakes. This is huge. Dreamwith actually has a wiki page that one of our volunteers started that honestly I originally didn't really understand. It's like, why? Okay, if you want to do that, sure, but that doesn't make much sense to me. The wiki page is things that real Dreamwith programmers do. And I've come to realize that this is important. This is, on this wiki page, anybody who has messed up Git, accidentally reset their branch and lost a patch, or there's one on there for me now that I understand it. The community laughs because they understand that I accidentally uninstalled MySQL on a production server and took the site down. And I call myself a sysadmin. So, but everybody makes mistakes. Everybody, we're human. And technically and non-technically, importantly, people make mistakes when it comes to respect and when it comes to the sorts of things I'm talking about here. But technically too, and everybody should be allowed to make them and allowed to say, I did that. That was me. And not have people come back on them and say, well, you're a bad person, or you're terrible. How could you do that? Why didn't you see that? Consider being explicit Dream With has a diversity statement. That's one of the first things that we wrote and published back before we launched. There's also community guidelines, code of conducts. These sorts of documents are important for explicitly stating that you're a community that cares about this sort of thing, and you're a community that says we're addressing this, we're going to do something about this. We want to do something about this. We want to be good about this. Culture has to be embodied top down. I'm not saying that it has to be implemented from the top, right, as a directive, but it needs to be embodied everywhere. You can't have an accepting, encouraging project if your leader replies to mails with, you're wasting my time. Get out of here, right? Like, this patch is terrible. Everybody needs to be part of this. If the leaders aren't, then the people in the middle who are only half convinced won't be convinced. They won't participate, and it won't work. So this is kind of fuzzy. This is not really talking about specifics, but I'm a very concrete thinker. I like to have, well, this is what you can do, and this is how to do it. So let's talk about putting this into practice. Value all contributions. And I do mean that, because let's talk a little bit about the newcomers, people who show up at your project and want to contribute. Your first revelation as a project contributor that somebody new has shown up is probably going to be a patch. And it's probably going to be small. It might be a typo, something like that. And that's going to be your first contact. But let's look at the other end of the iceberg, the bottom end, the 90% of the iceberg. This person has come to your project. They realize that there's a typo on this button that they use every day that has been bugging them for 1.5 years now. They want to fix that. And they're like, oh, this is an open source project. Maybe they've heard that word, maybe they haven't. Maybe they were poking around on the website and they saw open source and, okay, that means I can fix that, right? So they've come to your project, they've cared about it, they've understood that you have code, they've figured out where to get that, figured out what to do with it, how to download it, figured out where that button is in your source file, which in Dreamwith case is so many files, 300,000 lines of code and huge. So when somebody has done that, then they've gone through a Herculean effort. They figured out where that is, how to make the change, how to verify their change, maybe, maybe not, how to create a patch file, how your flow works, whether that's submit patches to your mailing list or submit a branch to GitHub and then submit a pull request. They figured all of this out, and then they've spent a day, 2 days, 5 days agonizing over the submit pull request button because they're about to show you what they've been spending the last 3 weeks on, and they don't know what you're going to say. They don't know anything about you. Are you going to throw that back in their face? Are you going to ignore them? Are you going to reject this time and effort they put into it? So by the time you get that, pull request number 417 has been opened by a name you don't understand or a name you don't know, there's somebody on the other end who is, this is their toe in the water. This is their, I'm kind of interested in this. I'm willing to do something about this. And it is now your job, your goal, if you want to build a more diverse and successful open source community, to capture that. And your next move is vitally important. How you respond to that person is going to dictate whether they become a part of this community or whether they wander off and we never see them again. I'm convinced that we talk a lot about not having a lot of contributors, even among the 10%, and how we see the same faces at conferences year after year, the same people in the communities. I'm convinced that a lot of that is not because we don't have good foot traffic, as we call it in the industry, or inflow. The front end of our funnel, I'm convinced, is fairly healthy. A lot of people show up and are interested. We just don't have any idea how to capture that, or we have bad practices for doing so. Value all contributions. Bugs are just bugs, and this is about the making mistakes. We write software, we're human, we make mistakes. Those are called bugs. It happens. It's not a critique on your personality or you or your skills. It is just something that happens. We work with it, we deal with it, we move on. We hopefully have testing processes or development environments or ways to help reduce these, but bugs happen. A cheering or encouragement squad. We have some in the audience. This is also one of those things that I was a little skeptical about, but sort of developed. And now it's one of my favorite things about the community. We have people who may or may not be contributors in the code sense, but they are contributors in the part of the community sense. And they spend a lot of their time following the commits, following the bugs, talking to our contributors, to developers, to everybody else. And just when you submit a patch for something, they say you're awesome. Thank you. You have fixed this thing. That's cool. You're working on this project that I care about. You are awesome, and I'm glad you're here. So what is a huge reason for doing this and a big effect that this has on your community? Has anyone not heard of imposter syndrome? Okay, we have a couple of hands. We've talked about the other 90% and sort of where they come from, and the background of active and passive discouragement or encouragement in other directions. And those are voices that you end up with for the rest of your life. You know, things that your parents have told you, you will hear forever. And imposter syndrome is the idea that maybe those voices are right. Maybe you're faking it. Maybe you're standing here writing this little patch when you're sitting at your terminal at home and you're hovering over that submit pull request button. You know, maybe you're just kidding yourself. Maybe you can't be part of this community because whatever, you don't fit the mold. You don't look like Bill Gates. You know, you're not a Mark Pincus or a Mark Zuckerberg, right? You're not one of these guys. So maybe you can't be an open source developer. It's called imposter syndrome, the idea that you're faking it, that you can't do this. And an encouragement squad or people that are excited, people who are happy to be part of your project, people are happy to say that folks are doing a good job, is huge for this. Actively saying, I'm glad you're here, is awesome and huge. Patch review timeliness. This is another one that is a bit of a huge psychological thing for people. Being able to say, I submitted a patch and then somebody took a look at it and they got back to me quickly is, Dreamwidth used to have a policy of 3 days. We would review patches within 3 days. And unfortunately that has not stayed the same. We tend to be quick on certain types of patches that are smaller and less quick on certain other patches and depending on people scheduling and such. But and this is something we should fix. But this is huge for people who want to contribute to your project. A lot of people are serial in their contributions. They will work on one thing, they will submit it, and then they'll wait for feedback. Because whether it's, you know, branches are hard, they are. Git is difficult to use for anybody. Whether it's that or it's just, you want to know how you're doing before you move on to something else. You don't want to put yourself out there 2 times, 3 times, 4 times without the feedback. So reviewing patches quickly helps not only with your code velocity, but also with just helping people feel happy with your project. Reject patches, which you will have to do. Everybody has to do it. But be helpful in your commentary. Don't just respond and say no, or not good enough, or just link to the style guide and that's that, right? Be respectful of people's time. These are people who have decided to show up and contribute to your project. They've decided to understand how your flow works, how your project works, how to contribute. Be respectful of that. When you reject a patch, provide some helpful commentary. Give them instead of just no, and then they're not sure where to go and probably won't, and then they're done, give them a pointer of, okay, this is not quite up to our standards, or this is not quite what we need right now. Here's where you can go from here. Here is your option, your way forward, a little bit of guidance, which is no should always be accompanied with why. Just being told no, it makes people upset. It triggers all of their, well, why not? And it makes people, it builds a bad environment. Being able to say no with a why can help convert people to whatever your side, your opinion, or just soften that, right? Respect their time and their decency, and they will respect yours. So talking about positive culture, it's also important to talk about negative culture. It is very important to deal with problems. This is one thing that open source communities in particular have had a big difficulty with dealing with. Toxic people, even if they're strong contributors, still have bad value, or EV or expected value if you're familiar with that concept. But overall, somebody who is a toxic person in your culture pool still contributes badly, even when you factor in how much code they write. But I talked about making mistakes. That applies here too. Mistakes are not just technical, they can be people. And a lot of the time, in my experience with Dreamwith, is that people who show up and who are kind of like this, who are kind of acidic and difficult to deal with, it's because they haven't been talked to. They haven't been sat down and said, you know, that's not how we do things here. Like, we're building a positive environment. And then they go, oh, okay. And whether or not they understand, most people are willing to go with it and be part of that. And then eventually they will understand. Be consistent and open in handling problems. You know, people shouldn't just disappear. It is important. There was an incident on the YAPC mailing list right before the conference, and it was dealt with. And then the Code of Conduct team sent out an email and said, this is what happened. And I think that that was a fantastic resolution to that problem. The person apologized and things moved on, right? People will make mistakes. You deal with it. Hot button topics. There is a certain, as you build a more diverse background, people come from different faiths, from different cultures, from all sorts of different places in the world, political beliefs, etc. And there are just certain topics that are very important to people that are not probably not worth, unless you're a political commentary open source project or something like that, probably just worth avoiding, right? For Dreamwith, it's politics and religion. If people start talking about that in our community, in the public, we ask them to take it privately. Like, go do what you want. Privately, that's fine, but as part of the community, we've just found overall that it leads to more badness than good to have these discussions. And to be fair, my business partner and I have certain disagreements. So
put that rule in place for our own benefit.
So it's important to deal with the negative culture. And then what? Change takes time. These are not things that will be fixed tomorrow. Even if you do everything I say, it's not going to be instant. It takes time. People have to come to know your project. Dreamwith has been at this for 5 years now, and we're now enjoying some success, but it's been a long road. There are groups out there that can help. The Ada Initiative at adainitiative.org is a group that is focused on, particularly on women in technology. So from that aspect, they can be really helpful there. They have a lot of good information on their website. If you're going to reach out to someone, though, and get help, that's great. But be serious about it. Be willing to respect the advice that you're given. Far too often, somebody will say, I kind of want to do this, and then they'll reach out, and they'll take a lot of someone's time, and then say, that's too hard, or I don't want to do that. That's not respectful, and that's just overall harmful. So if you're going to reach out to these groups, do it respectfully and be willing to actually be a part of this process. Start becoming known for your culture. Write about it. Blog, tweet, whatever. If you care about this like I do, if you say, you know, I think 10% market share is not good enough, I want 100, talk about it. It's only through us actually being part of this and stepping up to say we're going to do something about this that we're going to succeed, that we're going to make things better. For newcomers, again, most of Dreamwith's success in this area has not been by capturing existing open source developers. It has been by taking that nugget of interest from someone who says, you know, I'm interested in your project, but I don't know what I'm doing here, but I've got time and willingness. Bringing them in and saying, welcome. We are happy to have you. We want you to be part of this. Thanks for coming. Let's grab onto that as tightly as we can and do something with it. OpenHatch.org is a nonprofit that focuses on people new to open source, people who are interested. They work with projects to find basically bugs and things that are good for new developers, small things, and they will help review your documentation to make sure you have good onboarding sort of processes. They're a good group to look at if you really want to tackle that end of diversity, and I strongly recommend it. So, great, this is all good. There are some pitfalls. Don't think of this as being politically correct, because honestly, it's not at all about this. This is not about, you know, I want to make sure that I don't have a conference of all male speakers because then someone's going to yell at me on Twitter and then I'm going to have to cancel my conference, right? That is the wrong motivation for this. This is because I think that 10% is not good enough. And I think the world can be better. And I think that my communities that I'm part of can be better than that. And that is, thanks. I'm also not promising that if you do this, that you'll have a dozen women next week or a dozen newbies or whatever, what have you, whatever your goal is, right? Again, this is about building a better community. This is about building a healthier community, a place where people feel encouraged, happy to be part of. It's not about, filling the status quo or whatever your need is. This is also not one size fits all. This has worked well for us. I think that these ideas are pretty basic concepts of respecting people's time and effort and capturing the newcomers, helping them out. I think those are pretty basic, and I think that every project can do that. The specifics of how you apply them, those will vary from project to project. Some parting thoughts. Do something. Please, right? You've come to listen. You come to hear me talk for 45 minutes now, and I think that that's excellent. I'm really glad you came. But do something. Take this information, think about it, how it might apply in your own projects, or even if you don't run a project, but how it might apply in your day-to-day life. These sorts of respecting people and being encouraging and the cheering and being thankful and et cetera are just, again, basic concepts that just make the world a better place to begin with. There is help available. Again, the 8 Initiative, Open Hatch. There are others. There are wikis out there and people who are willing to talk about this. You're welcome to come talk to Dream with myself or Denise. We're happy to talk about this and for a long time. Start small, right? You can't fix everything tomorrow. Pick something, maybe from this list, maybe something else that you see as a problem in your project or the projects you work with. See what you can do to fix it. But just start with something. I would say, well, everybody knows Rome wasn't built in a day, but I don't know if everybody knows that expression. I don't know. I can't. It's probably not universal, right? Again, back to the sort of thinking where people come from and their backgrounds. So, there's an expression that Rome wasn't built in a day, and you can't get to Colosseums tomorrow, right? Think about what you're going to do. Think about that first brick you're going to lay, the first steps you're going to take, and start there, right? Be patient. Thank you all for coming to my talk. I will post the slides up on SlideShare, and I'll link them from Twitter. I've run out of time, so I'm not going to take any open questions, but please feel free to grab myself or Denise, and we'd be happy to chat about this. And thank you much, and enjoy the conference.